Here we're going to talk about linear models using endpoints. Now, just to be clear what that means, if we look at this graph here, when we say using endpoints, that means we're going to use the starting one for 1971 and the end in 2021. So those are the 2 points that we're using to create this trend line. So a dark line has been drawn from the starting value in 1971 to the end value of 2021. Find the linear model for this line. If we let 1971 be the start time, the X will be years since 1971. That means for the year 1971, X equals 0. If 1971 is the start year, what is the Y-intercept? Well, here's 1971, so we're saying here X is 0. We go up. That tells us that B is 42. Let's calculate the slope. All right, so the slope is the rate of change. We know we are using 1971 for X equals 0. So that means in 2021, X would be 50 because it is 50 years later. Ordered pairs, 0, 42, 50, 16, right? So we got, here's the X values, and then the Y values come from the ordered pairs in the table. To find the slope, we're going to use our change in Y's, Y2 minus Y1, over our change in X's, X2 minus X1. I'm going to use X1, Y1, X2, Y2. Let's substitute in what we know. So Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1, and I get negative 26 over 50. If you want that to be per 1 year, because remember, X's are all about the years, the Y's represent the percentage of smokers. So if it says per 1 year, we're going to divide negative 26 divided by 50, and that gives me a slope of negative 0.52 over 1. So that means the decrease of percentage of smokers is 0.52% per year since 1971. That's what it means. All right, let's put those pieces together. So B is 42, M is negative 0.52, and that gives me a Y equals negative 0.52X plus 42. And there is our model to talk about the decrease in percentage of smokers. Now, was the actual decrease constant? Now recall here that the actual is this blue line. Is that constant? Oh no, that is not constant. That varies, right? The actual, and y'all, in real life, things are going to vary. Very few things are actually linear. So fine, the actual stuff does vary. Okay, then we look at the model. Well, the model is the black line that we use to connect the pieces. So the model is constant. And the whole point of using a model is to be able to estimate. If things are going up and down all over the place, you can't estimate what is happening. But if you draw a straight line through the data, that allows you to say, okay, we know the equation of a straight line. We can then use this to estimate things. So let's do that. If the decrease had been constant from 71 to 21, what would be the estimated percentage of smokers at the turn of the century? Now, the turn of the century would be the year 2000, in case anybody didn't know. So let's think about if X is 0 in 1971, then what is X going to be in 2000? Well, how many years later is it? And the answer is 29. So we're going to use an X value of 29. Our equation, again, Y equals negative 0.52X plus 42. We have just said our X is 29 because we are estimating the percentage of smokers. So I plug in 29 for X, substitute that in there, plus 42. Order of operation tells me to multiply first. So I'm going to have Y equals negative 15.08 plus 42. So our estimate is 26.92. Okay. Estimate. Let me write that down. Estimate. Because remember, we're talking about the year 2000, which is right here. Okay, so our estimate is 26.92. Estimate 26.92. What is the actual? Well, as I just mentioned, the actual in the year 2000 is 25. So we can compare these two. Well, if I'm comparing them, the estimate is 1.92 percentage points higher than the actual. Now, that is absolute change. If you wanted to use relative change, you would take that 1.92 and then divide by the old, which would be the actual. And that would end up, or you could say the estimate is 7.7% higher than the actual. So that's kind of, whether you want to use absolute change or relative change, that's kind of up to you. And the last question here, I believe, number 9, use the model to estimate the expected percent of smokers in 2011. All right, so if we have, again, y equals negative 0.52x plus 42. Let's think through again. 1971 said x is 0. So 2011 is how many years later? Well, that's 40. Y'all, I'm a very big visual learner, so I write stuff down like this all the time, like so that I can kind of understand and say, okay, if I know this, sometimes if you see it, it just makes it a lot easier than if you're trying to do it all in your head. So I'm going to take that 40 and substitute it in for x. So y equals negative 0.52 times 40 plus 42. Now, when I do that, I'm going to multiply together first. So y equals negative 20.8 plus 42. So y equals 21.2. So that is the percentage of smokers in 2011, right? That's what we were trying to find, the expected percent of smokers. And again, it's expected. This is an estimate. It is not, factual. We are using the model. So this is an estimate. And if we look at 2011, they don't give us that data, but it's pretty close, right? The blue line and the black line are pretty close there. So that is how we can use the endpoints to find the slope and kind of work through the trend line that way.